Hello again, and welcome to Cutting Through. I'm Mitchell Plitnick, the president of Rethinking Foreign Policy and the editor of the Cutting Through newsletter. I wanted to talk today about I guess, the hot topic, which was the murder of right-wing ideologue Charlie Kirk. There's a few thoughts that I think are important to share, and I think first of all, the response to this. Um, I get that he was a big name. I get that he was a famous, and important, look, important and successful right-wing ideologue. Inspired a lot of people. A lot of people liked him on the right. Um, and but we're treating his death as if he's some sort of major force, and getting flags at half mast seems a little much. um we've had other people, who are famous people, who are important thinkers, die and even being killed. And it does seem a bit overblown, but be that as it may, I mean, I think some people may find that the level of attention is appropriate, and that's a fair point. Uh, but I think we also that there needs to be some addressing of the perspective here. Um, Yesterday, I initially responded to um, to Charlie Kirk's assassination, if you will, by talking about what I saw initially, which was too many people who consider themselves progressive or leftist actually celebrating the action, as if this was we struck a blow now. And I found that to be very much the wrong response. And so I posted the following to a couple of social media sites, writing that I oppose the death penalty without exception. I abhor killing, tolerating it only when it's absolutely necessary. So if you're celebrating the shooting of Charlie Kirk, miss me with that shit. Whether it's an individual or at a mass level, people are looking for ways in which killing and extreme violence is acceptable. That's a problem. It is in fact the problem. It's a problem with a lot of the international law we have. The question is not when is killing forbidden. The question is, when is killing permitted. People want to know, when is it okay for me to shoot somebody? When is it okay for me to drop a bomb? And the answer is, it never is. Sometimes it's an unavoidable necessity, but it should never be thought of as okay. Now, I'm no pacifist. Defending yourself is absolutely your right, and defending your family, your people, fighting against oppression, using force, when necessary. These are rights people must have. But even then, deadly force must be an absolute last resort. Now, Charlie Kirk was a monster. I wrote this and it said, is a monster. He had not yet died. Um, that doesn't make it okay to shoot him. It's immoral and it's self-defeating, because this incident is going to be a rallying cry for Kirk's followers, regardless of the identity and politics of the shooter. And it's worth pointing out, a day after I posted this, they still don't know who did this. There was an initial posting on right-wing and main, sort of, well, I don't know if you call it mainstream, but whatever you want to call it, social media, that had a picture of some middle-aged white guy who was named and said was a registered Democrat, as if that somehow proves anything. Um, and I don't know what's happened to this guy. I don't know if he's received death threats or has been even assaulted. So this is very dangerous. But the fact is, there is no suspect in custody, although apparently there's some video of what was described as a college age person on the roof where supposedly the shooter was. But we don't know who it was. We don't know what motivated this. Look, for all we know, this could have been somebody who was, kind of, obsessed with Jodie Foster and decided to take it out on Charlie Kirk, the way John Hinckley once did with Ronald Reagan. More seriously, it could have been somebody with some personal gripe against Kirk. We don't know everything that went on in anyone's personal life. Um, it could have been that. It's certainly, a strong possibility that this was a political act. But the fact that we have Utah's, I believe it was the governor, actually just state this as a fact without evidence, that's very, very dangerous thinking, and it needs to stop. So, but regardless of where that comes out, this act was immoral, and it was something that's going to spur on Kirk's followers. So, no, this was not a positive for anybody. And if we celebrate this act, we here, meaning progressives in the left, we're no better than Kirk and his ilk. So yeah, miss me with that shit. So that was my view yesterday. That was what I had to say. Um, I think we also need then to look at the way some Democrats and some liberals and centrists have responded to this, and that being ways that I think were just awful, frankly. Um, the fact of the matter is that some people decided that the way to deal with this was to praise Charlie Kirk and um, to say that somehow Charlie Kirk was a hero or a positive role model. Um, I I just can't even imagine the thinking that goes into this. But there it is. We've seen it, and we've seen it far too often. I think prominently we saw it today in an op-ed from Ezra Klein, who's gone completely, in my view, off the rails. Not that he was ever all that great politically, but he wrote this. You can dislike much of what Kirk believed, and the following statement is still true. Kirk was practicing politics in exactly the right way. Was he, though? Was he really? I mean, take a look at the way Kirk practiced his politics. He didn't just express views, he fomented hatred. Okay, and he wasn't simply putting out right-wing political views. Look, that's legitimate and it's fine. And even what Kirk did is certainly not illegal or anything that should be banned. It's free speech. But saying that he was practicing politics in exactly the right way, was he? I mean, I think you should maybe look back at the way Kirk talked about women, the way Kirk talked about Black people. He wasn't simply presenting political views. He was expressing hate. That's not what we should be encouraging in our political discourse. You have issues. You say DEI is bad. We can talk about the coded racism in there, but that's very different from being out there and just basically saying Black people are incompetent, which he said. That women are should be focused on motherhood and staying in the kitchen and bedroom, which he said. Okay, that's very, very different from expressing a political view. Klein continued to say he was showing up to campuses and talking with anyone who would talk to him. And this I do grant. Charlie Kirk did that. He did it frequently. And it's something we do need more of. He engaged people who disagreed with him. And I think that's good. We should be doing that more. He was one of the era's most effective practitioners of persuasion. Again, I ask, was he? He was somebody who shouted down his opponents, not necessarily by raising his voice, but by raising his rhetoric. He didn't necessarily argue with facts. He didn't always argue with truth. And these are not things that we should be praising. There is a reason I myself don't often, occasionally, but I don't often engage in debate in public. And the reason I don't often do that is that whether I can win or lose, and I can win plenty of debates, there are people who are better debaters than me, and there are people who are not as good as me. But that shouldn't be the question. whether you're good at debate doesn't necessarily mean you have the right argument, especially because, people can't fact check in real time. They can't fact check themselves. They can make honest mistakes, recall something incorrectly, as well as blatantly lie. And these things happen. And I think we need to be cognizant of the fact that real debate um, is something that is very, very structured. That's not what we're talking about when we see these people on stage, trying to shout each other down. So I don't know how effective a practitioner of persuasion Charlie Kirk was. Um, he says, when Klein continues, when the left thought its hold on the hearts and minds of college students was nearly absolute, Kirk showed up again and again to break it. I don't know when the left ever thought that. I never heard a leftist say it. Um, I had the misfortune or fortune of going to both my undergraduate and my graduate studies at a somewhat later age than most people. And I went to two universities, UC Berkeley and University of Maryland College Park, that are generally considered fairly liberal, and found plenty of right-wing students there. Both, this was in the 90s and just a decade ago. I don't think there's anything new there. Um, I don't think there's any concept that I mean, certainly we know that most college students tend to be idealistic, as well they should be. They're young. And God help us all if young people can no longer find space for idealism, and frankly, we are taking that space away, and it's a tragedy. Um, because you only get less and less idealistic as you get older, and you're confronted with just how harsh the world is, and how hard change can be. Um, but this notion that the left was ever convinced it had this big hold, it's the right that's been convinced that the left has the hold on college students. It's never been true, and it's never been the left that made that argument. So Klein is just, as he so often is these days, Mr. Abundance is out to lunch, completely divorced from reality. Slowly, college age voters, Klein notes, shifted sharply right in the 2024 election, which is such a simplistic and silly statement. College age voters were disillusioned with people like Ezra Klein, people who are coming up with these ridiculous abundance theories and centrist thought, and trying to manipulate public opinion without delivering real change. That is what the Democratic Party has become. That's what Ezra Klein these days advocates. He used to be somewhat critical of that sort of approach, but that's changed. And that's what he's talking about here. Um, the rightward shift of college age voters has a lot to do with turnout, and the fact that so many college age progressive or left wing voters saw no one to vote for. Klein doesn't want to address that. It's a difficult place for him. This is, not unique by any means to Ezra Klein. We're seeing this among politicians as well. So, Gavin Newsom, who you can always count on for really, just, ridiculous things these days, and self-aggrandizement, and doing everything he can to reinvigorate the same Democratic Party that's been losing and losing and losing, but under his banner, this time, so that he can become president, he hopes, in 2028. Gavin Newsom, he had this to say: "The best way to honor Charlie's memory is to continue his work." Really? Um, I mean, I think there are reasons we need to remember this incident, and I'll get to that in a minute. But uh, honoring Charlie's work and continuing his work is not something that anyone needs to do. People, need to resist these factless arguments, which is what Charlie Kirk's stock and trade was. Now, when he says engage with each other across ideology through spirited discourse, this I agree with. Yes, and as I've said that, and I do think that one aspect of Kirk's battle plan was a good one. and it is one that we should be doing more often. And the fact of the matter is, and I do want to be fair here, as toxic as Charlie Kirk was, and as toxic as his politics were, and as loose a relationship as he had to facts, he did tend to, when he did engage with people who disagreed with him, he did tend to do so relatively, for the most part. There was an incident here and there, but for the most part, he did so civilly, and we do need more of that. We do need more of that kind of discussion, whether it be on a stage or just at a coffee house or over dinner. We do need more of that. We have become, very atomized. We often don't hear from each other. When we do, I know I personally, try to go out of my way to hear from reasonable right-wing people, because otherwise the only right-wing people I'm going to hear from are the ones who are spewing venom at me on Twitter. And that, I think, gives me a distorted picture of the people I'm contending with, and that would not be a good thing. So, it is important to seek those things out. On that basis, I do agree with Gavin Newsom, that one aspect of Charlie Kirk, but it's eliding who Kirk was. It elides how much hate he spewed, and that is not acceptable. There are conservative arguments, and it used to be that we'd have those debates. There are conservative arguments that can be made and can be debated. Um, the ones that are being advocated by people who call themselves conservative today, who are not conservative, who are really quite reactionary, led by the reactionary in chief in the White House, um, that's not helpful. It's not productive, and it certainly doesn't help build discourse. And Charlie Kirk wasn't doing that. His method, in some cases, was good. The talking with people who disagree with you, and the fact that he tended to do so in a more or less reasonable manner, that is good. So that sort of method that he used is a good thing. But what he was doing out there and the politics he was bringing, and the lack of facts, the lack of truth, the lack of honesty, and the massive manipulation in what he did, we need to get away from this. Part of the problem that we face is that both Democrats and Republicans engage in very different ways, but in the science of communications. How do we convince people of this? It has nothing to do with actually making a good case, and it has nothing to do with actually presenting something that's, policies that are to the benefit of the people that you're trying to reach. I think, unfortunately, many Trump voters are learning that right now. But Democrats are no better. Democrats do the same thing in a different way. We saw this with the bullshit that Kamala Harris was spewing in 2024 about the politics of the campaign of joy. Joy? People can't feed their kids. What the hell are you talking about? And unfortunately, some people who should have known better, people who are fairly respected, they were out there saying, well, many of these potential Democrat voters just don't understand how good Joe Biden's been for the economy. Joe Biden was terrible for the economy. Joe Biden did not help working people. He did, when he first came in, push forward things that all were temporary, all disappeared, and everything snapped back to where it had been before. And people noticed that. People's lived experience did not match what Democrats were saying, but Democrats continue to use these sort of communication techniques. Republicans do it too, and Charlie Kirk was a master at this. We don't need more of that. We need a lot less of it. We need more honesty. And I know that sounds naive. It's like we've gone so far that the very concept of a public speaker, certainly a politician or a pundit, speaking with honesty and talking about their best, they could be wrong. You can be honestly wrong, but talking about their best interpretation of the data that they have and what their conclusions are for good policy, that's a joke now. We don't even, nobody expects it. Nobody even thinks it's possible. And I think that's something we have to get back away from. Now, I want to circle back to where I started this in closing, which is to ground this in the notion that I said before. This act, whoever did this for whatever reason, it is unacceptable in the extreme. It is immoral in the extreme. Gunning somebody down, even if they're a horrible demagogue, is not the answer. It simply is not. You know, um, just a couple days ago, we saw Israel go and bomb a Hamas meeting in Doha in Qatar, and they were targeting the Hamas leadership that had gathered there to discuss a proposal that they had gotten from the United States for a ceasefire. Now, we know we can talk all about Israel's, reasons for doing this, etc. But after it happened, despite even being criticized by Trump for doing it, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu issued a statement saying, if you don't, rein in and expel and bring terrorists to justice, we will. Basically saying we will hit anyone, anywhere, in any country, and we just don't care. And we will do this all on our own with no justification from anyone else, no oversight from anyone else. That is not an acceptable way to do any sort of politics, regardless of who the target is, regardless of how monstrous they are. I got flack years ago, many years ago, when the Obama announced with some glee that American forces had killed Osama bin Laden. Look, we all hated Osama bin Laden. None of us were weeping any tears at his death. But extrajudicial executions cannot be called acceptable, number one. And number two, I will not rejoice in death. I just won't do it. I think it's a danger. Look, I like an action adventure movie, and as much as anyone, when the bad guy gets killed, I enjoy it as much as the next person. But in real life, killing is a tragedy. It's sometimes necessary. I'm not saying Obama was necessarily wrong to kill bin Laden if there was no possibility of actually arresting him and bringing him to trial, which I think would have been much better for everyone. But so I didn't weep tears over it, and I don't, I can't say I'm weeping any tears over Charlie Kirk either. But the act of killing is itself a tragedy, and it's not one that we should be encouraging. And these days, there's a lot of encouragement. We've certainly seen, and it's unfortunate because we're also seeing examples of how politicians, again, led by the ideologue in chief in the White House, politicize this issue of political violence. And they only talk about it happening to one side, but it happens, across the political spectrum, which is granted a pretty narrow spectrum. It gets broader when you include, government actions and various, independent actions that kill prominent leaders. Historically, we all think of Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, John F. Kennedy, etc. But just in recent months, look at this list: the kidnap attempt on Gretchen Whitmer, January 6th itself was major political violence that caused people to get killed. The attack on Nancy Pelosi's home, where she was not home, but her husband was, and an 82-year-old man gets hit on the head with a hammer. Miraculously he survived. That's terrific that he survived. But, that's unacceptable. And anyone who follows me knows my opinions on Nancy Pelosi are very negative. Just as negative as all the things you've heard me talk about Charlie Kirk in this video. The assassination on Trump. How did that help anybody? How did it help? It helped get Trump elected. It helped get Trump sympathy. It helped make Trump look not like the weak man he is, but like a strong person. The Molotov cocktails thrown at the home of Josh Shapiro. I find, Josh Shapiro, I don't like many of his politics and really hate his politics when it comes to Israel. But that's, again, how does that help? And it is again immoral. This is not something that we can call acceptable behavior. It's not an acceptable tactic. The former Speaker of the House in Minnesota, Melissa Hortman, and her husband murdered. The shooting of the United Healthcare CEO. Everybody, said, hey, that there were a lot of jokes about it. There was a lot of people celebrated it. That was a big one, among liberals and progressives. And the guy was scum. The guy was trash. Did it help? Is anyone's healthcare better now than it was before? In any way, shape, or form? Has it made other healthcare CEOs any more reluctant to rip off people and deprive them of the healthcare that they're entitled to? No. And then, of course, Charlie Kirk. None of this helps. None of this is useful or positive. So, at the same time, it is crucial, absolutely crucial, that we do not take this and say, yes, it is bad that Charlie Kirk got shot, but then take that and somehow gloss over how horrifyingly bad a force Charlie Kirk was and how many other people like Charlie Kirk are still out there. Shooting them down isn't going to help. There's always someone else to take over for them, number one. And number two, it just turns us into the same people that we're fighting. So I hope you'll all consider that. And again, as always, if you can support this work, please do. It's mitchellplutnik.substack.com, where you will find links to donate and become a paid subscriber. Thanks very much. Have a good one.